Okay, so welcome to part 8 in the series. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover a basic example of ES6. This is only going to be a very basic example of how to use jQuery of ES6. The main reason behind that is because a lot of websites may or may not use a lot of JavaScript. So I wanted to give an example that wouldn't overwhelm people that are primarily writing back-end code. So just before I start with this, I'd like to point out there's 3 files that I did change in the Part 7 code that you might not have seen in the previous video. It's just a small change of the class I applied on the P tag for my test page. It's still the same styling, and I also changed the publishing tag to assets for the Sass. So now I'll continue on with the main tutorial. So with compiling ES6, this is something again that is in the webpack file. So in the last tutorial, I commented out the line that compiles JavaScript. So if I put that back in and get rid of mix on the Sass part, so that it looks like the original file. So now this should be able to compile JavaScript if it's put in the correct resources directory. But for this, I'm basically going to put a JavaScript file within the package folder, and I'm going to change the directory path of the mix.js to the vendor folder. Now, I could write some code that'd use the kind of similar symlink functionality that I'm doing with Sass, but since it's a single file and the directory structures down to the interpretation of the developer, I thought it would be better to have a more basic example. So looking at the package.json for what is already included from the npm install from the last tutorial, you can see some of the dependencies that would be available in the node modules folder. So you can see jQuery is already here, which means that we can actually use jQuery without downloading it from anywhere within our code already. So if I create a JavaScript file within the package, so creating a folder in the assets folder, and then simply creating a file called app.js, since this is the file that Webpack is looking for. And in this file, I'm just going to write JavaScript for package, followed by the name of the package. And then this is going to be the ES6 import syntax, which is the equivalent of require if you've used Node.js before, or the equivalent of use in PHP. So if you're not familiar with this syntax, there's a lot of documentation on it online. So you can see with this line, I'm importing jQuery and making it available through this $variable. So because jQuery is included in the node modules by default with Laravel when you run npm install, the Webpack configuration also makes sure that any dependencies within node modules folder would be available using this syntax. So that first line just includes jQuery. And I'm basically going to do a document ready example. Since this is one of the most common pieces of code written by anyone using jQuery, because jQuery is used for mostly front-end widgets and UI, which need to wait for the web page to be loaded. So I'm just going to do simple console.log and then hello world. So since this JavaScript lives within the package, I need to change the Webpack file to point to it. So this would be simply adding on the vendor folder, followed by the 2 directories of the package, and then followed by source. So the next step would be to go into the layout and include a reference to the script using the script tag. And again, using the asset helper to make sure that the assets are all loaded from the same place and there's not going to be an issue of using relative URLs. So if I jump into my site and run npm run dev to compile the JavaScript, sorry, I may have included the import incorrectly. So if I jump in back into the JavaScript file, I believe it's lowercase. This is simply when you're running npm install. If you look at the package.json, you use the name of the dependency from here, and it has to match the case as well. So my error there was making the Q uppercase, which is often the way the jquery name is defined. So if I try running that again, now that I've corrected that issue, you can see that now compiles fine. And if I go back to the web page, click on inspect element, go on console, reload, we can see we've got the message coming from the ES6, and that's now functional. So that's it for this tutorial, and the source code will be in the description, and that's it.